Welcome to the Property Nomads Podcast. We've got a great guest today. You want to stay tuned till nearer the end, as this guest is going to be giving you a lot of really useful practical information about energy saving tips within your home or your portfolio if you listen to this and you're a landlord. Rob Nezard, UK radiators. Might geek out a little bit about radiators in this, but ultimately I'm going to be talking about ways that you can help cut down either not necessarily your usage, but help to cut down your bills, like tips, tricks, etc. So very prevalent episode given everything that's going on at the moment. Rob, all great people are called Rob as far as I'm concerned, but thank you for
Definitely
your time today.
Agree. No worries, thanks for having me, I appreciate it.
So before we get into the really good stuff like radiators and tips and tricks, etc., a bit of background about yourself, what it is you do now and what you were doing before.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I've been, currently in the heating industry. I'm managing director at UK Radiators. Been doing that for 12 years now. Prior to that, I worked in other similar type businesses and primarily e-commerce. So, I mean, depending on how far you want to go back, Rob, but I mean, if you want to go back to the school days and things like that, I probably wouldn't have a great deal to tell you because I wasn't there very often. Not really much of a academic, if you like. But I guess you would say entrepreneurial. I don't really like talking too positively about myself in that sense, but I guess you would say I was just always entrepreneurial. I was always doing little business things. It wasn't exactly my plan, if you like, to get into radiators. I was heavily into e-commerce. I was importing electrical goods from China and selling them online, and I have my own eBay store, all this kind of stuff. And just where I live and where the business is based in Colchester in Essex, saw a job advertised for a local e-commerce business, and they happened to be selling like plumbing and heating goods online. I wanted to expand on what I was doing and learn a bit more about e-commerce generally and online retail and go and work somewhere that was a bit bigger than what I was at the time. And yeah, that's how I got into radiators. So as me and the owner of that business ended up starting what was originally Distinctive Wholesale Limited, which was a distributor of radiators for other online retailers. And that's then evolved into UK Radiators as it is today, and ukradiators.com.
Fantastic stuff. So I do like that entrepreneurial sort of streak and spirit, and the fact that going from one section to another, it's all correlated in one way, shape or form. And now being UK Radiators, I find that fascinating. I really do. Obviously there's a lot of stuff happening at the moment in this worldwide, but most of our listener base UK based. I mean, without sort of geeking out too much on radiators, obviously you get your different systems, don't you? Obviously you get mains gas systems, you can have electrical system, or you can even have oil. Do you want to run through the various, not every single radiator type as such, but do you want to run through the various different systems you can have, and maybe some advantages, disadvantages, if there are any, of various systems?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So in terms of when it comes to radiators, all of the radiators that we sell generally, radiators generally can go onto any system. So that's quite a common question that comes up, to be fair. Like, people want to know, like, is this radiator going to be suitable on my system? Generally speaking, if it's a wet system, a radiator can go onto any system. Advantages and disadvantages. I mean, at the moment, gas central heating systems are more efficient. They're cheaper to run. So, from a personal or an individual's perspective, gas central heating is generally the way to go if you have a choice. But obviously, not everybody has a choice. In certain parts of the country, you may be, away from the gas supply, so you end up, out in the countryside, and you have an oil-based heating system or something along those lines. But that really is more out of necessity than than choice, I would say, because the cost is going to be slightly higher than running a gas system. When it comes to electric, the options when it comes to an entire electric system are still pretty few. I mean, you can have individual electric radiators, right, and individual electric heaters put throughout a house, and sometimes that, based on installation constraints, that is the way to go. But I don't think you wouldn't choose to do that over and above a gas central heating system from an efficiency and a cost point of view. If you were planning a development from scratch, let's say, it's highly unlikely that you would just decide to put all electric radiators throughout the property when you could install a gas central heating system, or now with the levels of insulation that you would have in the property, a heat pump or something like that.
That fascinates me. So I'm going to attack this with my EPC head on. So you're saying that let's just take a typical 1950s, 1960s sort of council style property, semi-detached, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So you're also, in fact, any property that's older than that, thinking about it. So you're saying from a generic efficiency point of view, that mains gas is the creme de la creme. It's number one. If you can get mains gas for your system, that's the best thing. But enviro-wise, and this is a thing that I'm struggling to get my head around, that there's this massive push towards, solar, wind, electric. But actually, if you've done that, it's not overly efficient necessarily price-wise. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I try to get my head around as an EPC person as well, is that if you go to a customer's house who've had, for example, a heat source pump retrofitted, because it's depending on what heat pump you got, it normally will go down on the software as an electric only system. Actually, it decreases the EPC rating, doesn't increase it. It should increase it, but it doesn't. It makes it worse. Mains gas is still the best from an EPC point of view. So I would say I'm off on one, but fascinated to hear that from your perspective, actually, mains gas at the moment, that's the most efficient way to heat your home. Fascinating.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would just say if you've got a very modern home, like built post 2013, the level of insulation that you've got, it means that a heat pump potentially is going to be more efficient. You're going to be able to run it at a much lower temperature. See, the thing about it's the same with gas as well. The thing about these systems is it's lower temperatures. Like, as a general rule of thumb, running the system at a lower temperature is going to be more efficient and more cost effective. It's the same with gas boilers. So if you've got a modern gas combi boiler, the way that you get the benefit of that is because it's condensing. But it can only condense, which means like reuse the wasted heat if it's running at a low enough flow temperature, or it's actually the return temperature that needs to be below a certain level to be able to get that condensing benefit. And so that's really the key to these more efficient systems, is running them at lower temperatures. Now, obviously, to be able to do that, you need well insulated properties, because it's kind of maybe seems obvious, but I think for some people it can be, you can kind of be led to believe, oh, a heat pump's going to save me loads of money. But if your property is built in the 1960s, like you say, or even like pre-1990, it's not that clear cut, because it really does depend on the level of insulation that you've got in your property, how well insulated it is, that's going to enable you to run the system at a lower temperature. And again, when it comes to radiators as well, you are going to need appropriately sized radiators, because if you're running your system at a lower temperature, to get the heat out of the radiators and into the room, they need to be appropriately sized. So like a bigger radiator can provide, a bigger radiator at a lower temperature will provide as much heat to the room as a smaller radiator at a higher temperature. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So if it's got the appropriate size and it's running at the appropriate temperature, it will still have the same effect. It makes sense to me. Yeah, absolutely. it makes perfect sense. And again, it's an interesting point. I'm not sure that many people would necessarily have thought about before. So that's the whole point of having this podcast. Is actually it's quite a fascinating topic.
So that's the kind of real challenge that we're facing in the industry at the moment, or that we're looking at in the industry at the moment. That how to get that message across to people, how to best explain to people that if you see a radiator advertised online, you might see it. It might have a really high BTU number, and you think, oh, that's great, that gives out loads of heat. But you have to correlate that back to the system operating temperature, because a radiator can provide a whole range of different heat outputs. It's all dependent on the system operating temperature. And quite often you'll see websites or catalogs even where they just advertise the highest possible heat output for that radiator. But what that would mean is running your system at such a high temperature that you're just burning so much fuel to get that heat and you would never do that. So it's, getting that message across to people is kind of the mission we're on at the moment, explaining to people that you need to be looking at the delta. So when you see a radiator advertised, it should have a delta rating as well. We actually advertise our radiators with 3 different delta ratings, just so people can understand. And sometimes it prompts them to ask the question as well. It prompts them to ask, look, what are these 3 different heat outputs? Why are there 3 different heat outputs for this radiator? And it gives us the opportunity to explain to them that at delta 30, the heat output is lower than at delta 70, but delta 70 means that your system is running at a much higher temperature and you're burning loads of fuel to get that heat. What people need to be looking at is, especially to future-proof their systems when they are buying new radiators, is looking at the delta 30, working out the heat loss requirement for the room, the heat loss calculation for the room, and then sizing their radiator based on a delta 30, because that way they're going to future-proof their system and enable them to get to the point where they can run their systems at lower temperatures.
Just to go back on that point, for people that might not understand the delta rating, because you just, like, in layman's terms, what is that delta rating?
So delta rating is in very simple terms, it's just the difference between the room temperature and the temperature of the water in your heating system. And so if your desired room temperature is, say, 20 degrees, you want to keep your room at 20 degrees. It's the difference between when you take the flow temperature of the system and the return temperature, you add them together, divide by 2, and then subtract the room temperature. And it gives you the difference between the temperature that you want the room at, and then the operating temperature of your system. Because if you imagine if the room is sat at 0 degrees, you need to raise the room temperature to 20 degrees, then you need enough of a difference between the temperature in the system and temperature in the room and the temperature that you want to achieve to be able to do that. Sorry, I know it's getting a little bit, it's hard to explain it very, very simply, but that, in the simplest terms, the delta is just the difference between the desired room temperature and the water temperature in the heating system. A lower delta is going to mean that your radiator gives a lower heat output, but it means that you're running your system at a lower temperature, which is more cost effective.
Perfect. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. Just question that just came into my head was, how do you know the most appropriate size radiator for a room? How would the customer or a landlord or whomever, how would they know that, or how would you know that? Is that down to heat loss perimeters, or how do you work that out?
Yeah, so it is quite a complex calculation. You have to perform an entire heat loss calculation, and I couldn't even go through that with you now. It's so complicated. But it's, what we do, or what we're building at the moment, which is set to launch in the next 2 weeks, is a web-based application called Radsizer, which effectively is going to make it really, really easy for people to do that. You go on. It will take them about 7 minutes to complete the questions, and it's all questions about your property, when it was built, what's in the room that you're looking to heat, what's around the room that you're looking to heat, where you are in the country, because obviously geographical locations have an impact on outside temperatures, which then has an impact on the lowest possible temperatures you're trying to get beyond, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So RadSizer is our solution to that. It's going to make it really, really easy for people to just go through, answer I say a few questions. There are quite a few questions. It takes on average about 7 minutes to complete, and then the system will tell you what size radiator you need.
I love it. I also love getting into the real nooks and crannies of this stuff as well. It's really, really good information, very useful. What I would say is, as and when that launches, Rob, if you pop over some form of web link, we'll put that in the show notes, and then people that are listening to this will be able to use that moving forward.
Oh yeah, we'll do that for sure.
I guess then, rather than going off on multiple tangents, and because we can take this conversation anywhere, let's go on to these sort of practical pieces of advice. Obviously, a lot of stuff going on externally at the moment, and there's always, I don't know, Martin Lewis is the person that I think of immediately. He's got great email once a week and loads of great information in there. But where you're an expert on heating systems and radiators, what sort of things could people do in order to either maximize their heating efficiency and keep bills as decent as possible without freezing themselves to death?
Yeah, so I mean, when we've been doing a lot on this at the moment. As well as the fact that we sell radiators, we do also have on our website an advice center. So ukradiators.com/advice center, where we just put as much information as we can for people, whether it's specifically related to radiators or not. And so obviously a lot of questions that we're getting at the moment everywhere, like whether it's interpersonal relationships, or whether it's even members of the team. This is stuff that people want to know. So we've put a lot of work into this, and we have got a lot of advice on the website for this as well. The reason I'm kind of prefacing what I'm saying with this is because it is a complicated topic, and there is no one size fits all. Mm-hmm. So what I don't want to do is say to you, like, I'm going to give you some tips, but what I don't want to do is say, here's some tips and they'll be suitable for everybody, because it doesn't work like that. Everybody's got different systems with different levels of insulation, properties built at different times. And so there really is no one size fits all. So the first thing that people need to do is understand the system that they've got in place. Mm-hmm. They need to understand what they're working with, right? Because everyone's going to have different circumstances. So that's number one. Understand your own system, and then move forwards from there. Obviously the aim, what we want to achieve, we want to reduce the amount of heat we're generating without compromising on comfort. Reduce waste, significantly reduce the amount of heat that we're wasting. And then we also want to slow the rate of heat loss. So we want to make the most of the heat that we are generating. So, I mean, in terms of like reducing the amount of heat that we generate in the first place without compromising on comfort, some key ways to do that would be to remove air from the system. So you would do this by bleeding radiators, for example. There was a study conducted in the Netherlands actually that showed that air in the system can increase energy use by up to 6%.
Wow.
So, in these current times, that can be quite significant. When to bleed your radiators, if you've got cold spots at the top of your radiators, when you've got your heating system on, you just want to go around, check your radiators, just touch the tops. If any of them have got any kind of cold spots or anything like that, it means that there's air in there and they need to be bled. And doing that will improve the efficiency of the system overall, and will save you money on your heating bills as well. Mm-hmm. So another one reducing heat in unused spaces. So this is one that isn't necessarily, it's going to be situational. So it's not necessarily the best thing to do in all situations. If you've got a well-insulated property and you've got a modulating thermostat, for example, on your boiler, then you may not want to do this. It may not be the right thing to do. But if you don't have that in place, then it's highly likely that this will save money, because if you're heating unused rooms, especially at this kind of part of the year, like when you're in sort of November, it's not really, really cold outside. You really don't want to be just wasting heat by heating unused spaces. So using your TRVs to turn down the temperature in those unused spaces there's some information out there and some studies out there that say that proper and effective use and management of your system using TRVs can save up to 12% on your heating bills. I think that's from Energy Saving Trust. It's obviously a reliable source. Commonly, people with TRVs are only saving about 2 to 3%, but the kind of prevailing wisdom there is that they've got the TRVs, but they're not using them effectively.
Yeah, that again makes sense to me. And just in case people are wondering what a TRV is, it's not a vehicle; it's a thermostatic radiator valve. So yeah, you'll find the big knobbly things normally on your radiators. That's what a TRV is. But no, point taken, Rob. Makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then something else that we've been doing a lot of research into at the moment, and we've got an article that's either live or just about to go live on this topic, weather compensation. So the thought process here is that your heating system is designed to heat your home from generally speaking -1 degrees up to your desired room temperature. So that's the temperature that's used as the outside temperature when doing heat loss calculations and to calculate what is going to be required to heat your home. Most of the winter, or most of the time that you're using your heating system, it isn't -1 degrees outside, right? There's only the very, very coldest parts of the year. So what this means is that the flow temperature, or the temperature that you're operating your system at, and this advice is really for gas boilers. I think 90% of the homes in the country are gas boilers. It's going to vary slightly if you have got a heat pump or if you have got a different type of system. But for gas central heating systems, if the system is designed, as I say, with that -1 degree temperature in mind, it means that for most of the year, it's actually operating at too high of a flow temperature, and you can reduce that flow temperature down and save money. There's estimates between 10 and 40% that you can save by reducing the flow temperature on your heating system, because at that top end, that 40% end, that's really where you've got a gas boiler that is an A-rated gas boiler, but isn't currently operating in condensing mode at all. And so by reducing the flow temperature, what it means is that you then get the efficiencies out of the boiler because it can then operate in condensing mode. Weather compensation is a really, really good way to do that, because like I say, you don't necessarily need the design flow temperature at all points throughout the year. So weather compensation can be done by installing a weather compensation control. So this isn't something that we sell, but it's something that you can buy at a relatively low cost. It's a type of boiler control. You would need a gas safe registered heating engineer to advise properly on that and to install it for you. But yeah, there's real big savings to be had there. What we've got in our article is explanations on how you can do this yourself, like how you can actually take control of the system yourself, because you can yourself turn down the flow temperature of your boiler. But before doing that, you really need to understand the system, understand what you've got in place, and really read up on the detail of exactly what you're doing.
You read my mind there, Rob, because that was going to be my next question was, if someone like me looking at my own boiler, could I possibly do that? But again, you've just answered that by saying, as long as you understand your system, you should be able to do that. So you read my mind.
Yeah, can be done. And then some other things really for everybody, like some things that would be suitable for everybody. So remember I said that we want to be able to reduce the amount of heat that we're generating without compromising on comfort, but also we want to slow the rate of heat loss. So that what I'm saying really is we just want to keep the heat in the place that we want it to be. Like, we paid all this money to generate all this heat. We want to keep it in the place that we want it to be for as long as possible, so we get to use that heat for as long as possible. So some of these ones might be a bit obvious, but some key ones would be insulation. So thinking about insulation first is what I would do if I'm thinking about how to improve the efficiency of my system. I would start with insulation. There's some quick wins. There's hot water cylinders. If you've got one and it's not insulated, you can insulate your hot water cylinder, which will save you wasting energy there. Hot water pipes as well. You can insulate those. It's a really low cost way of reducing waste by I think you've probably seen them, right? You get these like foam covers that you put over your hot water pipes. Obviously slightly bigger ones, cavity wall insulation. So if you were looking to invest into future proof, this is where I would start, cavity wall insulation, if it's not already done. It is an investment, but it is going to save you a lot of money in the long run. And then, draft exclusion. I nearly forgot what I was saying there. Draft exclusion. So draft exclusion, again, really low cost, something that everybody can do. Under doors, around windows, really kind of low cost, quick wins that you can implement to reduce or to slow the rate of heat loss. Also, closing doors. I know it probably sounds a bit obvious, but closing internal doors. So understanding heat, right? The way heat works is it wants to go to the coldest possible place, right? So if you've got a really nice warm living room and then somebody comes to the front door, you go and open the front door with your living room door open, the heat is going to rush out of that front door. I know it might sound obvious, but closing the living room door before you open the front door is going to keep the heat in. And I don't want to kind of come across as like kind of talk, saying stuff that's really too obvious, but these are the kind of things that I think people need to be thinking about, and just sort of thinking about heat in the sense of, you've paid to generate this heat, keep a hold of it. And these are the ways that you do that. Some other quick tips. So moving your furniture away from radiators. So wherever you put your radiators is generally fine. A lot of people ask, should a radiator be installed under a window or on a opposite wall or whatever? It doesn't make that much difference. The thing that makes a real difference is whether you're blocking the radiator. It needs airflow to properly convect heat around the room. So moving obstructions or moving furniture away from radiators, make sure they're not covered by curtains or anything at all, really. And then the other big one, I think, that people sometimes unsure about, and we kind of touched on it earlier, is if they've got, say, a portable electric heater and a gas central heating system, or in one room maybe they've got an electric fire and they've also got a gas central heating system, what should they use? Should they use the gas central heating or should they use the electric? Gas is cheaper than electric, and so if we're talking about money saving, then the gas central heating is the way to go. Use your gas central heating. You're going to cost yourself more money by trying to heat your home with your portable electric heaters or your gas fire. So yeah, that's probably all the tips I've got for you.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, and yeah, no need to apologise for any of those tips at all, because again, these are things that maybe some people have thought about, maybe some people are completely oblivious to, and it's the whole point of having you on the show is providing that information in the first place. So I guess my last question, and thank you for those useful bits and pieces of information. I quite like the one about closing your doors before opening other doors. Actually, that's pretty good. I think I know the answer because I think you've alluded to it earlier on. If you're running the system, and obviously we're coming to the colder part of the year, is it better to keep turning it on and off, or if you can maintain it at a lowish temperature, is that more economical for your boiler? I'm just going to talk regular mains gas. Is it better to have your boiler on at a lower temperature or on off? Is there no difference?
When we're talking about lower temperatures, are we talking? Do you mean the flow temperature of the boiler, or do you mean the room temperature at your room stat?
Yeah, I'm going to say the room stat. So is it better to say have it on 18 degrees and have it on for a longer period of time, or is it better to then put it on, I don't know, 20, 22, but you only have it on for an hour or two a day? Does it make a difference to boiler efficiency? Hopefully that question makes sense. If it's too generic, I'll try and put it down.
No, it does, and it comes up all the time. It really does. I just wanted to clarify, whether we're talking about the room stat or the flow temperature of the boiler, because the two things, it can become confusing for people. But so if we're talking about with the room stat, having the room stat set to 18 degrees versus 20 degrees will absolutely represent a cost saving. The way that a room stat works, though, is that it calls for heat from the boiler when the temperature of the room drops below the desired or the set room temperature. So if you set it to 18 degrees, if the room drops to 17 degrees, it will call for heat from the boiler. And so the boiler will fire up and it will bring your room back up to 18 degrees. So really what you're doing by having it at 18 degrees is you are turning your boiler on and off automatically, just keeping your room at 18 degrees. It's really about comfort as well, right? So if you're using the room, keep it at 18 degrees. But if you're out all day, there's no point in heating an empty room or an empty house to 18 degrees or 20 degrees or whatever your desired comfort level is all day long, just so that when you come home, it is warm. What you want to be able to do, though, is use a timer so that when it comes on, say, an hour before you come home from work. So that you walk into a warm room because you want that comfort, but you don't need to heat your room all day long to be able to achieve that.
Again, makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that, because that's something that's playing around in my mind. Rob, I think there's so much great and useful content there, so thank you for taking the time to explain all of that. If people wanted to find out more about yourself or UK Radiators, where do people find you?
Yeah, so Instagram at UK Radiators. We're always sharing tips and advice on there. The website ukradiators.com. As mentioned earlier, we have an advice center on there as well, ukradiators.com/advice center, or you can find the link to it on the website. They're the two main places. We are on Facebook as well. Again, at UK Radiators. I think we have a TikTok as well, pretty new, but it's quite difficult to make TikToks about radiators, believe it or not, but we're trying.
I've seen all sorts of things on TikTok, so I'm sure you'll succeed somehow.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Thanks again. I really appreciate that. Hopefully people listening are going to be able to scribble down some notes and start implementing things that you've said. As usual, we'll put links and whatnot into the show notes, so you'll be able to contact Rob. Just look in the show notes. Rob, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.